Hey everybody, Freddy here with another video. This time we're gonna dive a little bit deeper into the Azure OpenAI permissions and also the Azure OpenAI Studio. We're gonna dive a little bit deeper into the permissions and how the permissions affect access into the Azure OpenAI Studio. And also we're gonna be diving a little bit deeper into how you can upload data to the Azure OpenAI Studio or service, and how you can set those boundaries and how you can attach a storage account to that Azure OpenAI Studio as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the channel. So let's get to it. All right, as always, I always like to get the terminology out of the way before I jump into the demo. So let's get started with the permissions and how those permissions affect the Azure OpenAI Studio. So first of all, what is the Azure OpenAI Studio? The Azure OpenAI Studio is a friendly interface that Microsoft gives you in the Azure OpenAI service, where you can access the language models, including the GPT-4, the GPT-3.5 Turbo, embeddings, and things like that. It gives you the ability to upload data so that you can set boundaries, so that when you're using the model, you're using it on specific data that you're uploading. Not everything that the model was trained on, but it's only looking at the data that you're uploading. So I'm going to show you how that's done. Once we get into the demo, I'm going to show you how you can link a storage account so that you can continue uploading files, and the model will only look at those files. And as the files grow, then that is also growing as well. Some of the things that affect the access into the studio are the permissions that you give. So the Azure OpenAI is based on the RBAC model, which is the role-based access control, or RBAC. And some of the permissions that are already created are these four. The Cognitive Services OpenAI User, Cognitive Services OpenAI Contributor, and the Cognitive Services Contributor and the Cognitive Services Usages Reader. Pay attention to the first two. They have the OpenAI Word. The last two do not have the OpenAI word in them. There's a difference when you look at those permissions. So let's go ahead and get into them. Let's look at the first one, which is the Cognitive Services OpenAI User. This one gives you the ability to view resources in the portal. So when you open the portal, you're able to see the resource. You're able to see the endpoint under the keys and endpoints. You're able to view the models that are available for deployments in the studio. You can use chat, you can use completions, you can use DALL-E as well, but you're not able to create new resources. You're not able to view or copy or regenerate the keys. Again, you're able to see the endpoint, but you're not able to see the key. So if you're doing your own programming through Python, you need both. You need the endpoint and you need the key. So by having this permission, you're not going to be able to get the key. You're not going to be able to regenerate keys. You're not going to be able to create new models or edit models that are created already. You cannot create or deploy custom models. You're not able to upload data for fine-tuning, which is setting those boundaries that I was talking about. You're not able to access quota information. You're not able to create content filters. You're not able to attach a storage account or add a data source. So a lot of things that you're not able to do as a Cognitive Services OpenAI user. The next one is the Cognitive Services OpenAI Contributor. Typically, Contributor gives you a lot of access when you're talking about a subscription, but when you're looking at about OpenAI, it allows you to create custom fine-tuned models. It allows you to upload data sets for fine-tuning. Again, upload data sets, but it does not give you the ability to create new resources. You're not able to view or copy or generate the keys. You're not able to create new models or edit the models that are already created. You're not able to create or deploy custom models. You're not able to upload data sets for fine-tuning. You're not able to access quota information, and you're not able to create custom filters. And you're not able to add a data source. In other words, you're not able to link a storage account to this resource or to this service. The next one is Cognitive Services Contributor. This one does not have the OpenAI word in it. This one gives you the ability to create new resources in a resource group. So this is the key, in a resource group where you were, the boundary that was given to you. You're able to view resources in that resource group. You're able to view resource endpoint. You're able to view, copy, regenerate keys. You're able to view the models in the studio, in the OpenAI Studio. You can use chat, you can use completions, you can use DALL-E, you can create custom filters, you can add a data source. In other words, you can link a storage account. You can create a new model or deployment. You can edit an existing model or deployment that is already created. A lot more permissions. This one is the one that I would consider contributor, just because I'm used to the contributor access. When you set up contributor access in a subscription, you pretty much have access to everything. So in my head, when I think of contributor, I'm thinking about this. So Cognitive Services Contributor gives you this type of access. Now the one with the OpenAI word in it does not. What things that you cannot do as a Cognitive Services Contributor is you cannot create new models or edit in the OpenAI Studio. Again, remember, this is in the OpenAI Studio. And here it says create new resources in a resource group, but in here it says inside the OpenAI Studio. You cannot access quota information, you cannot create custom fine-tuned models, and you cannot upload data sets for fine-tuning. You can add a data source, but you cannot upload data sets. Okay, so the last one is a Cognitive Services Usages Reader, which gives you the ability to view quota allocations in Azure OpenAI Studio. So there's a lot of information here. I know I had to take a couple breaths in between because a lot of information. All right, so before we jump into the demo though, I want to point something out that I did not add to the PowerPoint presentation, but I think is very important. As of today, September 9, 2023, private endpoints are not available in the Azure OpenAI Studio. In another video that I created that talks all about private endpoints, I mentioned that you can set up the private endpoint firewall as disabled. And when you set it up as disabled, that means that you can only access that resource through that private endpoint. If you do that, you're not going to have access to the Azure OpenAI Studio. Unfortunately, as of right now, that private endpoint to the studio is not available. It will be, I'm sure, at some point. I just don't know when, but keep that in mind, that if you're going to use the Azure OpenAI Studio, you have to leave it open at this point. Okay, from the portal, here we are. We're going to start with the demo. The first thing I want to show you, I'm sure you've seen this before. You have this Azure OpenAI here. You have your service. Under here, you have a lot of the Azure Cognitive Services information. One of the things that you're going to notice is that once we start adding data sources, like a storage account, when you start linking a storage account to the Azure OpenAI's, in the Azure OpenAI Studio, it's going to ask you for a cognitive search service. So it's going to ask you to create one. If you don't have one, you need to create one. So you're going to set one up here. So going into the service itself, you have seen this before. You have your endpoint. This is the one that you point to when you set up your Python script or whatever it is that you're using. If you're not using the studio, you have to manually take this and you have to get your key and endpoint here. And this is how you access that service. Models and deployments. You have this section here where you can manage your deployments. I'm going to open this in a new tab. And here you have deployments and you have models. And deployment name, The deployment name is GPT-3.5 Turbo. The model name is GPT-3.5 Turbo. Somebody asked me in a previous video, which one should I use? Should I use the deployment name? Should I use the model name? What I did is I called the deployment name the same as the model name, so that way you don't have any confusions. This is really for me. When I was doing it, it was just much easier, so that way I don't have to be thinking, okay, which one am I going to use? I just called it the same, and it's much easier to use that way. The models that are available, GPT-3.5 Turbo, and here these are the ones that I have available for me. So anyway, going back to my service here, if I go to the overview, there is this section right here which says go to Azure OpenAI Studio. One of the things that I pointed out is under networking. If my networking is set to disabled and I have a private endpoint, then I'm not going to be able to use the Azure OpenAI Studio. And as of right now, September 9, 2023, that is not available. It has to be open to either all networks or selected networks, but all networks would be the easiest. So I'll go to the overview and let me open this in another tab. So Azure OpenAI Studio. Here is my Azure OpenAI Studio. I have my chat information, completions, and DALL-E as well. So what are the deployments that I have? It's taking the deployment that I set up before as well. I have my deployment, I have my model name, same exact thing that you saw before. The models is exactly the same thing that I had before. So it's taking all this information from the model itself. Let me go ahead and make it a little bit bigger so you're able to see it. There you go. So again, the deployment is the same as before. Deployment name, model name. Now here under chat, if I go to chat, again, this is the playground. Under here, you can see that I have my under configuration. I have deployment, which is the GPT-3.5 Turbo, and that's the only one that I have here because I only have one deployment that I have available. Under parameters, I can set up my parameters, my temperature, my top P, and all this information here. The deployment name is the one that is set up to GPT-3.5 Turbo. Pass messages is 10. Here it gives me the token information. Again, if I just type, if I can type anything, who is Elon Musk? If I have this, and it brings information back. So where is this information coming from? This information right now is actually coming from my data. Let's see, am I set up? No, okay. Let's do, I don't have any data sources at the moment, which is great. So I go back in here and I say, who is somebody that, let me just say Churchill. And there you go. Sir Winston Churchill was a British, blah, 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 blah. So it came back with information. Now, again, this is because I'm not putting any boundaries on my data. This is just taking data that is coming from the internet. When the model was trained, this is pretty much where that information is coming from. It doesn't matter what I ask. It's just going to answer based on that data. If I want to set up boundaries, add your own data, what I need to do is I need to make sure that I have a storage account, because if I click on add your own data and I say add a data source, it's going to say, okay, it's going to be a cognitive search. Is it going to be blob storage, or am I going to upload files? I'm going to say I'm going to go ahead and set up blob storage. Then it's going to say, okay, which subscription and what resource am I going to use? So let me go ahead and create a new storage account. I'm going to go into storage accounts. I'm going to create a new one. Well, that finishes. I'm going to turn off the camera and I will be right back. All right, the storage account is ready. So now let's go ahead and go to the resource. Let's create a container first. Okay, OpenAI files, and now we are gonna go to SFTP, add a local user. I am ready with my container. So now I'm gonna go back. So this container at the moment, so just so you know, container has nothing, no files. Chat, add your own data, Azure blob storage. There you go. OpenAI test FMD, and container OpenAI files. OpenAI files. Here is what I was saying, that select an Azure Cognitive Search resource. This one is required because this one is going to index all the files. So I have a search FMD that's already created. If you don't have one, then you can just create one. And then it's gonna say index name. I'm not gonna specify anything. And then schedule once, you can say hourly. So every hour it's going to go in and look for new files and index the files. And then I say I acknowledge. I'm not going to add a vector search for this. I'm just going to say I acknowledge, and I'm going to say next. Data management search type is going to be keyword, and next. Save and close. Your data is being added. As you can see there, your data is being added. This may take a few minutes, so we're just going to let it run for a little bit. Okay, that's done. So now what I want to do is I'm going to type, who is Elon Musk? Again. Okay, now if you notice, now it says, the requested information is not found in the retrieved data. Please try another query or topic. The reason it's doing that is because I set up the data source here and it doesn't have any data, so it's not finding who Elon Musk is. So this is the reason why, because there is no data. All right, so let's upload some data. Let's see what information I have here. I have a lot of different files. King Arthur, Jack Black. All right, so I will upload some of this data. Okay, so Mark Twain, let's say Mark Twain. So let's go back to this. Let's go ahead and type, who is Mark Twain? And it should say, I don't know, because it doesn't have this information. Okay, so let's go ahead and upload Mark Twain. There you go, connected. So I'm going to say put Mark Twain.txt file. I uploaded Mark Twain. Okay, so I uploaded Mark Twain. Let's go back to the OpenAI Studio. Chat. Next. Keyword, and next. Save and close. Okay. Okay, let's try this again. Who is Mark Twain? Okay, Mark Twain, and now it has one reference because it says that it's in the marktwain.txt part 1. who is Napoleon, and it's going to tell me the requested information is not found. All right, so let's upload Napoleon.text. All right, so I have uploaded that. Now let's see how fast it does it. Who is Napoleon? The requested information is not found. So it's going to take a little bit of time for that search or that data to be indexed. Okay. I guess to speed it up, what I can do is I can say remove it, add it again. Okay, let's ask the same question. Who is Napoleon? Okay, now I found it, and it says one reference, and it's telling me that I found it, and it's still continuing to give me more information. So it's saying that it's coming from the Napoleon.text file. Who is Mark Twain? And it's going to take a little bit of time, but it's going to give me the information. And it's also giving me one reference, which is that file where the information is coming from. So in this case, what's taking the longest is that searching capability that needs to take place. As you can see, the data is turning into chunks and is being saved in the storage account as well. And this one is being done by that cognitive search that is being used in conjunction with the OpenAI Studio. So I set it up for an hourly search, so that means that if I continue to upload files as I was doing here, then what's going to happen is it's going to be searching those files every hour. So again, in a way you can automate this process, but of course when you use the Azure AI Studio or OpenAI Studio, it's typically just to test things out. You know, you can go in, you can upload your data, test it out, get out, and so it's not going to save your data. So if I just reload the browser, that configuration may be gone. I can export the setup and I can save it. So I can go into export setup here, and I can say export, and it's going to give me this JSON file that then later I can import. But there is no save button. All right, so we'll leave it at that for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. If I missed something, please leave it in the comments down below. And please give it a thumbs up if you learned something. If you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel. Until next time, take care.